Starmer's got the big speech this week, which I'll pick up on the breaking news episode. But he already said something fairly strident in an interview with Laura Kuenssberg, and I think that we can hear that now.
You said that proposal is immoral to deport people who are already here if they don't pass more stringent rules. Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it's a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
So, yeah, he's talking about Reform's policy on the removal of people who are given indefinite leave to remain, and he described it as racist and immoral. Before we get on to like what he said about the policy, Iain, I don't know if you saw that interview. I actually thought he was on quite good form. I was really surprised. I thought, has no one told him? Like, is he like Hitler? I'm not saying he's like Hitler, but is it like he's in the bunker moment where people are just keeping all the worst information away from dear leader?
Well, I didn't see it because I was on Sky at the time with Trevor Phillips.
Hello.
So that's my excuse. But no, a lot of people here obviously saw it and have been talking about it. That wasn't the consensus among some of the delegates here that I've talked about. They thought he was coming out with too many sort of trite cliches and just wasn't really engaging with the audience.
Are you saying that patriotic renewal isn't a clear idea for us to all get our teeth into? Is that what you're saying to me?
Well, what's the difference between patriotic renewal and renewal?
It's patriotic, you know? You do it while whistling God Save the King out of your arsehole.
David Cameron used to have this phrase, you got to keep it real. And the thing is...
I could just imagine him saying that.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to keep it real, dudes.
See, when you talk about patriotism, or is it patriotism? I never know which.
Patriotism, I think, yeah.
When you talk about that, people have got to believe that you believe it. So when Yvette Cooper goes in front of a microphone and says, well, of course, I've got a Union Jack on my kitchen wall. What percentage of the audience believe her? Now, she may well have, for all I know. I've never been in her kitchen. And Keir Starmer was going, I love the flag. I can't do the impression. I love the flag. I've got flags in my house. Have you really, Keir? Or have you just put one up so you can say that?
Well, yeah, and it does feel like they're sort of saying, yeah, some of my best friends are white people. Yeah. That does feel like what they're saying.
Exactly. And you look at these people who are ripping down the flags all over the country. And I saw a thing on Facebook the other day where this group of people, all wearing balaclavas, with a ladder, were climbing up the lamppost to rip these flags down. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder which party they vote for.
Well, maybe they're from the One Nation Tories. Maybe they're just really, really compassionate One Nation Tories. I would say, I'm generally in favour of civil liberties, but I do think, balaclavas and face masks, that's where my authoritarian streak might come in. Because since when has anyone ever worn them for anything other than nefarious reasons?
And this guy who was filming it, he said to them, sort of, why are you doing this? And one of them, all of them tried to ignore him, but one of them said, because they're intimidating. And I'm thinking, mate, if you're intimidated by a flag, you really need to look yourself in the mirror.
I mean, just in terms of what Starmer said about Farage's policy, right? I know that you've had your criticisms, I think, of the cancellation of the indefinite leave to remain. But just politically, do you think that was wise to call it racist and immoral? Because Farage will just have a field day, because now he can literally quote that and go, look, the people here who agree with this policy, Keir Starmer thinks you're racist and immoral. That's exactly what he's going to say, right? He's literally loaded the gun for Farage.
Yeah, absolutely. It is immoral. I mean, I've got absolutely no doubt about that. How can you possibly say to somebody who came to this country 30 or 40 years ago, regardless of the colour of their skin, who have obeyed all the rules, they've never taken any benefits at all, how can you say to them, well, you might be liable for deportation? You thought you were here for the rest of your life, because that's what surely indefinite leave to remain means to most people. And now they're told, oh, you've got to reapply under much stricter rules. Well, if they're much stricter rules, that means that a proportion of those people will, under this new system, be deported. Now, what other word can you use to describe that other than immoral? Now, I don't believe it's deliberately racist because there's lots of white people who are here under indefinite leave to remain.
This is the thing. I mean, this is the thing is I kind of thought it was odd that he used race because it's about nationality, isn't it? It's about It's about where you were born and where you've chosen to live now.
Yeah.
So why do people always use racism and never say nationalistic? Why is the word nationalism as a kind of pejorative gone out of the political lexicon?
Well, because that word dominates the debate on the flags. If you're somebody who has a flag in your garden up a flagpole, therefore the theory goes you're automatically racist. Well, again, it's absolute rubbish. But the irony of this new scheme that he's put forward, with no details, by the way, the irony is that it doesn't apply to EU citizens. And you think, hang on a minute, there's something deeply hypocritical here because if you just make it applicable to people outside Europe, that is discriminatory in one sense. And what was Brexit all about?
So
then?
just to be, because I'm just trying to get my head around it. So when it's people outside Europe, that could be countries that were predominantly Caucasian or people of colour, right? So I'm just trying to get a clear...
it's basically the rest of the world. And I just think it's so ironic that Farage launches a policy where the only people that it doesn't discriminate against are EU citizens, and that was his whole shtick, wasn't it?
I mean, I just sort of thought when Labour's attack line on it was that it was unworkable, they had my attention, because I did sort of think it did sound like, mass deportations, historically that has a lot of connotations to it, but just saying like, what happens if a whole load of... How do you do it? How aggressive do you have to be in the policing of it? Now, there will be support for people being, in the country for it being particularly aggressive, but there are perhaps a lot of maybe, conservatives, former Cameroonian types that they would have had their attention when they said unworkable. But the moment they say racist, it's now about something completely different.
Well, it is. And I just think... he's taking pages out of the Trump playbook here. I mean, not for the first time. And you look at some of these scenes that you see in America where these immigration officials literally batter people's front door down. And I mean, do we really want to see that here? Look, I hold no candle at all for people who've come to this country illegally. And I hold no candle at all for people who've committed criminal offences and foreign nationals. Get rid of them on the next plane back. Absolutely right. That is not racist. That is just being... I mean, any normal country would want to get rid of any foreign criminals. But there's a guy last week who was the guy from the Epping Hotel who was given a 12-month prison sentence. Now, and he actually, I think, volunteered to go back to Eritrea. But the system doesn't allow that to happen. They have to go through all sorts of hoops. Well, fine, reform that system so it can be put on the next plane back. I'd support Farage in that. But you can't do that to people who are here perfectly legitimately and have gone through the system, paid often quite a lot of money to get indefinite leave to remain and then sort of renew it however often you have to. And then people say, well, why haven't they become British citizens? Well, because a lot of countries don't allow dual citizenship. So fine, you can say, well, if you want to be here so much, then renounce your other citizenship. But you think about that the reverse way. If I was living in another country and someone said to me, well, you can't be British anymore, you have to renounce your British citizenship, I wouldn't do that. Would you? I mean, it's very simplistic to say, let's deport all the foreigners. And there will be a section of the electorate that think, yeah, let's do that. But I'm really surprised, I don't know why I should be, but I'm really surprised on social media, people who I've often regarded as sort of vaguely sane or relatively sensible, I mean, they think this is a marvellous policy.
Well, there is. I think it's about focusing on the details, the unfairness, like the fact that you're allowed to reappeal all the time and there's automatic extensions given. Another thing I found out over the weekend was there are a lot of people who come on student visas and then the moment the student visa finishes, then they claim asylum.
Well, deal with that. That is a legitimate problem which politicians should be dealing with. But this isn't a problem. People who are here perfectly legally.
Okay, we're just going to talk a little bit about ID cards now because this came out last week. I mean, we just keep it... The one thing I think is, like, it is odd because how you get one of these is with your passport, driver's license, birth certificate, a bunch of things that already exist to prove who you are. I was just a little bit unclear on whether or not, if somebody's willing to employ somebody who is already quite clearly working here or living here illegally, the existence of a digital ID card, does it change much materially? I'd imagine on your show you've had quite a lot of discussion about the details of this.
Well, no, we haven't at all, because it was only really, they trailed it, I think, on Wednesday or Thursday. And I think this is a major failure for Keir Starmer in that, yet again, it's a bit like the Liz Truss budget. There was no pitch rolling before it. There was no public debate about whether digital ID cards were a good idea or not. So they've announced they're doing it without really, a bit like Farage, giving many details as to how it would work and why they're doing it. Because it's very difficult, if they're doing it for the ostensible reason of stopping people working illegally. Well, at the moment, there are some quite stringent things where you have to provide ID to your employer. But clearly that doesn't sort of eliminate, as you say, doesn't eliminate black market working. And if you're doing it to appease the French, who are saying, well, the UK is a sort of pull factor because people know that they can work in the UK, well, I don't think this is going to actually do the trick. Now, we've moved on since the last ID cards debate, sort of when Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Jackie Smith, they were introducing them in the late noughties. Technology has changed. Most of us have got digital ID already in one form or another. If you have an Apple Wallet, for example, and use your phone to pay for things, which an increasing number of people do, you've kind of got digital ID. If you've got a gov.uk government gateway ID, you've got it as well. So philosophically, there's no reason why you should object to having another form of digital ID unless you view it as something where the government is interfering in your life and therefore and you don't trust the government with your data. I mean, that I think is a legitimate argument against it.
But as you say, the fact that those digital IDs exist in other forms is part of the argument. It's like, right, well, if you've got all that stuff, why do you need this? This is what makes people suspicious. So I'm deeply suspicious of it. Equally, there were some people on the right that just... there was a snap poll done, by the way. Digital ID had broadly had support in a rolling poll by YouGov for quite a while. And then the moment Starmer announced it, it became instantly a less popular policy. The moment that it had his brand on it, they're like, I don't know now, actually. What if Keir Starmer thinks it's a good idea? Maybe it's not. But then there were people on the right. So I basically did tweet saying, look, I just don't think the British public will get that exercised about this. We had people screaming for lockdowns. There's a lot of stuff that happened during COVID that shows a lot of people like the heavy hand of the state. But there were people on the right sort of saying that it will be the new poll tax. I was like, really? I mean, this is how the online thing can distort your view. Do you really think that people will go into London from all over the country I would imagine there could be a very big march, but I just don't know. Maybe I'm sitting in my own little centrist dad echo chamber, but I think it could be both unpopular, but also not something that will exercise people in the same way as something like the poll tax.
I kind of agree with that. But when you've got people like Boris Johnson, a former Prime Minister, saying, well, I'm not going to have this, I'm not going to use it, and I would urge you not to as well. If you get enough big name people urging civil disobedience, then as a government you have a real problem. And that is what happened in the poll tax. Now, I don't think there'll be violent riots like there was over the poll tax, but you can quite see a scenario where people just won't cooperate with something and it renders it utterly useless. I'll be honest, I'm kind of on the fence on this. I was very much against the original ID card proposals, but I do think times have moved on and we live in a digital age now. And I don't feel it would infringe on my civil liberties particularly. I'm not sure I trust the government with all this kind of data. That's my main objection to it. But at some point, I'm going to have to come down on one side or the other.
You absolutely, in the style of modern social media, Iain Day, you absolute fascist. Absolutely, you boot.